Cool. Hello, everyone. Um, I'll just first intro myself and what we're going to be doing here today. I'll start with what we're going to be doing with here today. So we're going to be doing a talk over, a voiceover of the production of BULAN, which is a really exciting silkscreen edition by Roby. It's really, really cool. I'm going to go through just kind of everything. We've got this great film that I'm going to talk over. It has everything from every tiny little part of the process with our wonderful team here at Make Ready. So you get to see some of them as well. Before we get into that, I can just go through like who I am. So I'm Tom Murphy. I started Make Ready in my garage 5 years and 14 days ago. Which is kind of crazy, and now we work extremely closely with Avant Art on just some of the most incredibly exciting projects. So you get to do personally what I love every single day of the week, which is just such a privilege, and with fantastic people as well. Make Ready is a fine art silkscreen printer. We're based in Kentish Town, which is in northwest London, which is kind of near Camden. I guess some people who aren't from London might have heard of Camden. And we are a team of 15, which is, we're quite a young team, which is really cool. Really, really pushing the boundaries of what we think we can do with screen printing. We're really embracing modern technology and RIP software and really interesting ways of separating artworks, and leaning on tradition as well. There's a big understanding that there's a long path of where we've come from, like Kelpra Studio. Some of you might not have heard of them, but they're really up there as some of the founders of the way that a modern print studio is. They were around in the 70s. They had a wonderful portfolio of prints at the ICA, I think, in the 70s, and they started in Kentish Town, so we really are in their footsteps in a way. I'll quickly just go over what is screen printing before we get into this mishmash of images that might be a bit confusing. It is a relatively modern process, so it can be heavily romanticized as this one of the kind of older processes, one of those incised processes or lithography or something like that. But really what it is it relies so heavily on modern plastics, and it really couldn't have happened without the camera. So it first emerged, roughly 100 years ago. I mean, that's a heavily disputed fact. Stencils suspended on mesh perhaps date back thousands of years, but the screen printing as we know it, and the commercial screen printing as we know it, is really an industrial method. It is the best way to apply a surface coating to a substrate. And you see artists using it, especially in places like New York in the 70s and 80s. I mean, you were thinking Rauschenberg, we're thinking Warhol, these are the big hits. There are lots of other people as well. I wouldn't be able to list every single sort of major influence, but that's that. If you think screen printing, that's what it is. And like I said, it was an industrial process for graphics and billboards and printing on fabric and things like that. And it's this incredible system of a mesh that can hold an ink film, and you can push that through and get an image on the bottom, underneath, on some substrate. It's actually crazy. Every time we lift the screen up, I still can't believe it's worked. It's so fascinating. Why would we use this over a purely digital process? For something so smooth, like one of Roby's images, you might look at it and think, oh, this is an incredibly smooth, wonderful, almost airbrushed image. Why would we use it if it's this industrial method? Why would we use it if you think Warhol and you think really heavily thresholded images, you think Marilyn Monroe, and every single one's a bit different. Why would we use it to produce this wonderful, smooth, repeated image on beautiful cotton paper? The reason being is because it's had a lot's happened since the 70s, I guess, is the way to sort of describe that. There are so many techniques. In fact, some people who are screen printers may completely disagree with me, but I would say it's less of an industry, but it's a technology used by many industries. So, for example, we make art. We're in the arts, so we utilize this industrial method and different types of dot sizes and ink systems that are, all the ones we use. They're commonly for like containers or build, or different types of prints that aren't on paper. But the thing is, you'd be so fascinated to know that the motherboard in your iPhone is a screen print. You can print solder paste, incredibly fine lines, and create circuit boards. The gun sights in rifles and things like that, they're all screen printed. Apparently targets that are used in the Large Hadron Collider to get tiny micron thick lines to use to calibrate that machine are screen printed. But you're talking about a place that's a factory of people in hairnets and totally dust free, but it's a technology that is utilized across many industries. Solar panels, that's another one that's screen printed and all the wiring's put on top. And t-shirts, obviously everyone would know, t-shirts would be done. I think what we should do now though is just jump straight into the video. That would be really, really great. And I can just go through and just talk to you, about what we do here and exactly how we make Roby's series of prints, and particularly this BULAN one. I won't go too heavy in the detail because I could dwell on every single part of it for hours and hours and hours, and I'm sure all of you would be very bored. So when it comes on, I'll start. I think it's just a moment now. So here we are. So it begins with the artworking process. So we really fundamentally believe that screen printing is a heavily digital process. People say, digital is kind of, is it quality? Is it high quality? Does it question the fact that it's not handmade? No, we use digital processes to capture the image with a very high resolution scan or a camera. And then we actually separate it using common programs like Photoshop, and we actually have a raster image processor or RIP software that will interpret the image and screen it. We call it, it's actually called a dot screen, and it will make it into an image that can be translated onto a screen, which is very confusing. Another screen, which is the mesh. Here you see Jen, who was just in the shot earlier, separating the artwork. There's her hand. And we are separating it into channels, and we won't call them layers yet. They are certainly channels of the CMYK image, or in this case, a CMYK. Sometimes we can output it in RGB. And you see just filtering through the channels here that we've already made. Now we've got a system down that we like to work with. We've really honed this over time, tested everything. We use a spectrophotometer very recently to actually measure some of these things as well as we print them, so we can feed that back into the computer and really understand what's happening on press. But we'll come to that later. You can see going through all the channels here, they get lighter and lighter and lighter. So what you can really understand from this is that, unlike a digital print where it prints every colour at the same time and that's it, hey presto, it's done. It's not as simple as that, but it is relatively simple compared to this. In screen printing, you have to separate every single layer and then print those, and you have something called interlayer adhesion, you have dot on dot gain, so you have to really understand, like you can see all the layers here being set up in the RIP software, how they'll interact with each other. Now, Jen's making this look very easy and making it look like we just sort of click print like she's about to do there. It's definitely not the case. It's just compounded years of experience that go into making this really work. So we've got the film positives out now. So what's this clear acetate here? This is a clear film with the image printed on it. That comes out of the printer just behind me here, and that's an inkjet printer. Some of you are very familiar with that in your house, but it's a very similar technology. It sprays ink onto a surface at a distance, a very small distance. Jen again, she will check every film. Every single film. There was a time when we ran films out the printer and we didn't even calibrate them and they didn't fit and blah blah blah. Every single detail, even up to this point, we haven't even started printing yet. We will check everything. We'll calibrate the printer, make sure it really, really lines up before we go into this room, which is the red room. It's a bit Twin Peaks in here, but here we are. So this is a screen. It's been coated. So it's like a mesh that's been coated with this green substance basically, and that dries on, and we essentially get what you might describe as like a plate. You know how a litho printer would expose a plate, a photosensitive plate. So we have this photosensitive emulsion that is kind of in this superposition, if you will, this Schrodinger's stencil, if you will. It's kind of in the mesh, under the mesh, and on top of the mesh at the same time. And whichever way you kind of look at it or think about it, it's kind of in all of those places at the same time, which is kind of cool. So it's going in the vacuum here. The film's gone underneath. We've got lots of packing. You can see that really, really tight, really holding this very, very tight. So the film positive that we have, sort of clear acetate, the glass, the mesh which has the emulsion on it. So that's sitting there really, really, really tight. So in Warhol's day, we would have enlarged this with a camera, but in our day, we can output a film 1-to-1, and then we can actually expose it directly onto the screen with this ultraviolet light. So this is actually a wavelength of light that's very close to ultraviolet light. It's actually called actinic light, and it's around 420 nanometers. So it's not advisable to look at it for a long period of time. So we do exit this room, and once it's done, we open it up again. Here's Anna and myself getting the boards out. So we have these in, and they're really, really packed down. We even found with a new bit of rubber on the top that was sucking it down really hard. We actually just developed all these little techniques. So I'll talk about this digital process, but ultimately there's so much experience and things that you really just know how to do with your hands that go into this. So, you know, we haven't even printed yet, and if you are buying one of these prints, or you're lucky enough to have one in a drawer, you are literally getting this compounded level of experience that tens of people have worked on. It's quite astonishing. So out it comes from the print down frame. That's what we call it, that frame that flips up. The light has exposed it, and where the light has hit, where the film wasn't, so the black areas of the film have stopped the areas of the mesh being touched by the light, and where they've been touched by the light, they will go hard or insoluble. And now Anna can wash this off, and we will develop the image. We use that language. We'll actually develop the artwork, and this is why it couldn't have happened without photopolymers. You know, it couldn't have happened without a camera. So we really are reliant on the last 100 years of technology. It is, the 20th century has quantum physics, but it also has screen printing. It's a wonderful technology that really has come about in the last 100 years. And it washes it with water, and the way that we've got this set up is that we really nailed this. Like this will just fall out of the mesh, so it's almost developed there. She'll just swing it round in here. Now, wash it with water a bit more to develop it, and you can see again those areas that have been blocked the light from touching the emulsion. The emulsion has now fallen away, and the emulsion is just a polyvinyl acetate, polyvinyl alcohol. It's PVA. You'll probably remember that from when you were a kid, getting it all over your hands in art class. It's just an emulsion. It's very, very a relatively simple thing. And there we go, it just falls out of the mesh, which is just really, really great. So none of this stuff, you might see people really gunning it. We really are interested here about making things really kind of perfect in this process, because if you can get this right and get this right every time, you can be really creative on press. And we really believe that to be creative isn't to be messy. I don't think that, you have to have one to have the other. I think being organised, or we certainly think at Make Ready, being really organised is actually a form of creativity. It's just another side of creativity. So getting all these things really right is really important. She's drying it now. It's then dried, it's then inspected. So we've got this stencil, like I said, it's in a superposition. It's kind of in the mesh, on top of the mesh and under the mesh at the same time. Felix, this is the wonderful Felix, he has the most delicate touch I've seen anyone have. He's a wonderful printer. He is filling out all the areas that we don't want to print. So you might think, well, how does the ink go on top, and will it go through? How will we control it going through? Will it not get through the top there where there's open mesh, So he's actually filling out, he's got tape on there. You see he's going over the reg marks, but he's actually got tape on there. He's going to do this and then heat the tape off, and we get this really, really perfect stencil. So we don't actually need to spot out any inconsistencies in the stencil that much. It's just that over a long run, what we want to do is make sure that we don't have any pinholes. You run 1,000 prints and you suddenly realise in the border there's a black spot, and you have to chip it out of 1,000 prints. As you can imagine, that causes grey hairs on a lot of the people that have to do it. So he's just being, this is his due diligence, and really all of this process, this is almost halfway through, and we are just doing our due diligence on making sure that when we get on press, which is very, very valuable time, extremely valuable time, we're maximising the return on that time of what we call uptime or on press. So that's what's going on here. They've taken it through. That's Mona and Felix there. Mona's one of our great freelancers. She's just in at the moment, and she is helping Felix load this into the bench. Here's some colours. So we obviously have to mix the colours. So before we even get started, let's have a look at this. So Mona is very, very carefully mixing in a base there, like what we call like a clear base. So some of you, have worked and you've done art at school, you might remember this. You have a clear base and a colour, and you mix it and you print it. So she does that there, and she's on some scales. So again, we're really, really keen on making sure that if we proof something, we write it down how we did it, and we do that. We have a very creative process. Then we write it down, and then we can do it again. And it seems obvious, but I spent a long period of my career not doing this, and it was extremely difficult. So now we have a bigger team, we can recall these settings. She's been very, very diligent there, making sure that it really adds up. We've got 2 decimal place scale, which has just been wonderful for us, and another decimal place. Now goes in the black. So you can see, how, Roby's got a lot of blacks in it. It's got a lot of, it's quite yellow, it's kind of red. How are we getting that colour? Well, this black, this kind of translucent black, you've got a lot of base here, and there's a bit of colour. We do this 25 times. We have cyans and magentas and reds and yellows and blacks that all make up this print. The clever thing about this print is that the separation technique is that we've made a custom colour profile just for Roby. So it's Roby's profile, and it crushes all the colour information into the first half of the image. And then what we actually do is manually separate the additional grayscale that goes on top of that. So that's actually what Mona's making here. We call that the SP layers, or the special colours, or the spot colours you might call it. So we've done all the kind of foundation work, and now this is the part that you're seeing. And this is actually the really magical part, because you can really see the imprint change. So Mona there is very diligently mixing the ink with a drill. You can stand there and do it by hand, but you've got a drill, you can do this. We very much control the rheology and the viscosity of the ink here. So you'll see actually in a minute she clears that by holding it above and pulling the drill and it kind of splitting off in the rest of the tin. You could definitely not do that if you're not in control of the rheology of your ink. If you do that with a very runny ink, it will go everywhere. So we control the rheology and the viscosity of the ink, and this ink is actually a thixotropic ink, which means it recovers its viscosity at a lower rate in which it loses it. And that means we can hold detail very, very well. So I could talk about that for hours, but I'm going to go on to the squeegee now. Felix is putting a new squeegee blade in for this, just for this video. No, it's for every other layer. We have spare ones on the side so we can not get squeegee lines, basically. They can really ruin the print. He's fixing it in there, another drill again. And what he's going to do now is he's going to cut a thin layer off the top of the squeegee. So imagine a stone that's split. No one has ever seen the inside of that stone. It's the virgin edge of a stone. And the same thing for the squeegee rubber. We will cut sometimes quite a dramatic amount off, but he's cutting probably 2 mil off here. We have this virgin edge, this beautiful edge. And this machine, it's all it does. It's wonderful. I actually love this machine. Again, it's saved my life on so many occasions, and Felix's, I'm sure. He's just going to take it out there, and then we're going to inspect it, and we're actually going to buff it as well. So kind of like a woodworker, just getting that lovely edge on that edge of that cabinet. We just really, really want this to work. And you might think, God, we need to get printing. Surely this is wasting time. If you get on press and there's a line in your blade and you've got all the ink on the squeegee, you've got to clean it off. You can do all this work. So he's doing that now. Sometimes it does happen. He has to go back to the drawing board or these clamps. And we've made this custom table. And we have all these lovely tools that we've worked with. There's a company, Encore Engineering, who made not this tool, but the one you'll see in a moment, and a German company called RKS, who make this lovely tool here, which is just a glorified sanding block. But it just fits the squeegee very, very well. So there we go. He's called a diamond fine, that thing, and he's a 900 grit synthetic diamond polisher. And then this is one of my favourite little tools. This just cuts the corners off. We do cut corners at Make Ready, but not those corners. The corners of squeegees, and they stop the stencil just kind of degrading over a long time. Again, little things like that really, really change everything. What Felix is doing right now with this job sheet, with the squeegee, with everything, he's making ready. That is where we get our name. We are Make Ready. We love all of these tiny things. You can go to a gallery and see the print, and it's brilliant and it's wonderful, and the prints you have, on your walls are just stunning. But we also love all the tiny little tricks and the details and the setup, because that's the love that's in there. So we even named ourselves after this process. Let's make ready the press, and that was it. It was called Make Ready. So he's doing that right now. He's checking the cylinders, making sure everything's fine. He's got the flood bar in there, which can also have lines in it, so we have sandpaper to buff that down. He's putting a little bit of tape on there, so when he cleans it at the end, he can just whip that off and doesn't have to get ink right inside the join. Again, still making ready here, just testing everything. You saw the screen go down there. That's actually the peel off that peels off at the back when the screen goes up. And yeah, he's just checking the reg. He's making sure everything's right with the machine before we go. Kind of like getting in a car and checking your wing mirrors and all that stuff. Now you might think, how is this handmade? Like, the machine, surely this is cheating. Sure, the machine's doing it for you. You are very much in control of this machine. If you set it up wrong, it will do it wrong every single time. And what's the wonderful thing about this machine is it allows you to do so much more. It takes you away from actually physically printing, which, after a while you can get very, very good at, and the romance kind of dies and you just want it to be the same every time. And then you become the voyeur. You're sort of witnessing this process that you don't normally witness. The thing about screen printing is that you need to be in control of all the parameters. You kind of need to watch what's going on. You need to measure, and that is creativity. That Felix is being intensely creative, just with his brain and perhaps not so much with his hands. It's almost quantum in a sense. You have all these probabilities that you sort of float. Like, you can't really see what's happening under the squeegee. But what you can know is like where that squeegee is and where it's going to be. And that's why I always describe it as kind of this quantum thing. You only can understand to a pretty fine degree what's going to happen, but you can't actually get in there and measure it, because if you measure it, you stop it. So he's passing the squeegee over here. He's checking the print. The screen is flooded with ink. It then comes down, and then the squeegee passes over the top. And the act of printing is actually happening just behind the squeegee. It's not the squeegee itself. It's just behind the squeegee where the mesh touches the paper and the mesh peels away from the ink. It is not the other way around. It is not the ink comes out of the mesh. So he's just going to check the artwork here. He's got a computer in the print room, and he's going to do, he's putting a bit more ink on here, just making sure we're really, really happy before we run all of these prints. It's the measure twice, cut once thing, and it's sort of check twice, print, I guess 250 times, but no more. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it. So here we go. We're just repeating and repeating. We've got to get this right every time. It really needs to happen. We can't have them waving and moving around. There is some variation, I must say, that they are still handmade. They are not a digital print. There is the human element in there. You cannot synthesize that, and that is why they have this luxury, this luster to them. Now, you'll see Mona here. What's she doing? She is not in a tan salon. She is curing the ink. So this is an ultraviolet curable ink. Now you might think, well, surely that's really dangerous. Well, actually we use LED curable ink, and it's a very modern ink. And we use these domestically available lamps that are actually for curing like nail varnish. And then we actually put them under, and it instantaneously dries. So the screen never dries in, and we can control all these parameters so much more. And even so, Felix and I and Mona there, we can all check it. Now you'll see something interesting here, that this strip of the new print is actually a bit more yellow. It's really, really cool what happens with UV ink, because it actually glows ever so slightly as you cure it. So as we got it, we trimmed it out. What you mustn't do is go, oh my god, the print is really yellow. You have to kind of control that. But if you wanted it to be, you could control that there. But we were just checking there, and it's interesting fact, so that's caught me out before. Mona's now cleaning the screen. We've done this layer. She's picked all the ink up. They're taking it out. It comes out the press. I must say this is making everything look very, very beautiful and calm and easy, but it is a very, very difficult job, and Mona and Felix are doing a wonderful job making this look really, really smooth. So it comes out the press. You see everything set up there. Now you see all that stuff on the platen there, the press. You think, oh, we have to move that every single time, right? We have to set up again. Well, no, even when we expose it with a jig in exactly the same place. So we can just concentrate on all the things that Felix is doing right now. He can concentrate on making sure that the artwork looks just like it is, and just like we've agreed with Roby. Line in the flood bar there, I'm sure that would be caught, and Felix would buff that out. And here we go, here's the next layer. So it's very similar to the last layer, but it really changes the artwork. And we build up this slow, almost develop the image. It grows out of the surface of the paper, we like to call it. It has layer upon layer upon layer of this polymerized ink, and that's actually what's happening. It's not drying, it's not evaporating, it's polymerizing on the surface. It's an amazing technology, and it's relatively new in the last 20 years. So Felix is checking the print again. You can see there's a lot of repetition in printing. We have to do the same thing over and over again, but that can breed complacency, and that's why we have wonderful people like Felix who checking diligently everything. All these bars on the side, what are these bars? They are so we can objectively check that layer out of context, in an isolation of what's happening. Are the 50% looking like 50%? Are the 25% looking at 25%? Because there's a weird thing that happens when you look at a print in different types of grey called colour constancy, and as humans we're basically incapable of seeing the correct grey or the correct colour without using a special device, or without using something like that, a mechanism on the side of the print. So here we are, another layer. he can pause the machine. He has to see it's quite hand done. He has to move the ink around. You know, obviously migrates its way to the side of the squeegee with those the shear forces that are going across the surface of the platen. He's just managing the ink fountain here, and this collective term for all of the ink on top is actually called the fountain of ink. And you can do a split fountain. You could have 2 or 3 colours in there that mix together, and you can get a really nice fade. So here we are, we're just checking a final layer. So really, really looking, and it's beginning to look like, actually, I think that may even be the final layer. It's really, really looking like the real thing there. One thing I'd implore all of you to do, or even maybe not do, but if you touch the print just with the surface of your hand, you can feel the ridges of the ink, you know, really sitting on top of each other. So it's a really sculptural image in that sense. What we're going to do now is just have some questions. So we'll, you know, I'll end this description. I hope that's been really helpful for everyone. And we'll just go through a Q&A. So I think I'm going to get some questions up on the screen next to me, and I'm just going to try and answer them as best I can, basically. So shoot away. Or actually, sorry, I've made a mistake here. I've forgotten that there's a little bit more to the video. Here is the surface of the print. So we'll come to the questions in a moment. I'm sure we were dying to ask them. It looks like skin. It's got this really wonderful texture, and this is what I was talking about. I should have waited for this moment to talk about the ridges and the beautiful texture. It just has something a digital print cannot have. It's almost like we've painted every dot there. Look at that. You know, it looks a bit dotty there, but this is so zoomed in. These dots are 52 microns. They are about the width of a human hair, which is really, really cool. But you can still see them, and you can allude to the kind of mechanics that have built the print. So it's not this kind of, we're not trying to hide anything. It's very much in sight. So that is it now. There's the logo. So that's Q to end. I would love to have the questions. So I think I've got some up here on the screen. So what is my favourite Roby piece? Someone asked. I actually really like this first print, which is just behind me here. It just has, it's just, I don't know, it's the first one we did, you know, it's like the first take if you're a musician. It's just, you do all these other ones and you just fall in love with the first one. So I have to say that one. And I like, because it's not actually looking directly at you, which is kind of cool. How do we scan the painting? In an ideal world, we would actually use something called a cruise scanner. It looks like something out of Star Trek, and we would get a very, very high resolution capture of the image. And when I say capture, that's like a aggregate term for, you know, capturing the signal. It's very similar to music. It's like with a microphone, like you're capturing the signal of the image, you know, so the light frequency that's going into a camera or scanner. So we may even do it with a camera. We may have someone, you know, go to the piece if it's a very large painting, and we would photograph it in panels and then stitch it together, and we could get a very, very close to the subject, high resolution image. So garbage in, garbage out. Say this in music as well. You can have the best the best guitarist in the world or the best piece of artwork, but if you don't mic it up properly or you don't get a good camera on it, we can only do the best print of a terrible photograph. So that is how we do it, basically. So it really, really starts from there, but we do have a lot of tricks, and we can make things look awesome, and that even if they're not photographed well. So that's a make ready house secret there. Is the monotone image more difficult than a color one when separating the layers? No, I mean ultimately it does have a color. So like, although it's monochrome because it has like one chroma, you know, you could isolate perhaps one point in the hue continuum that is this print. It still has we call them chromatic grays. So no, I tell you what, it's actually a little bit easier because you can kind of hue and tint the print over. But great question. But color definitely adds that kind of third dimension, if you will, even though there is some color in here, and that can make things very, very complicated, which is deeply interesting. Nice. Do you guys do the scanning also, or do you outsource it? Yeah, we outsource it. It's another game. You know, it's just something that we haven't invested in. We would love to do it in house. You know, we're looking at taking a larger premises, and we will have a space to do it there. But our expertise and where we've deployed our resources and training is absolutely to do with knowing how to do it, but getting someone else to do it and concentrating on printing. So we're very much involved in the process, though. We're not just photograph it, it comes in, and then we just go, that's good enough. We will give that feedback, and I think that's really important, that collaborative process. How long does it take in total? Good question. we are working very hard to understand this at the moment. So as we've grown, it becomes an even bigger question. But I would say it's about 2 colours a day. So on the edition, so you've got 25 colours, it's like 12.5 days. But then you've got to proof it as well. And this is assuming everything goes well. And that's why we have all of this technology and this wonderful team. And we work very closely with Avon Art and that beautiful operations team who really, really help us kind of optimize what's going on. It's a very interesting side of the business. So I'm glad someone asked that question. And then you've got to proof it. So you have to do the whole print again. So you do the proof and you make all the screens. So you make 25 screens. You might make more because you're testing things out. You're trying this. Maybe that's a bit dark. Changing the film. Then we get it signed off, and then we re-expose everything because we have 259 screens, but we're going through artwork so quickly that we have to do them again. So it can take 10 weeks or something like that, but it's very dependent on the artist. Roby seems to really love what we do and really allow us to go there. And it's kind of like a music producer. We're just like I think we're like great engineers, if you will. So some people really like the way that we'll like track their drums or make their print, right? And they kind of go with it. And other artists are a bit more involved, and that's just so it really, really depends. But in an ideal world, in a vacuum, it can take about 8 to 10 weeks or something. Of solid work. How many test prints do you run beforehand? We do the proof, so we might run, if there's 25 colours, we'll probably run like 35 sheets or something like that, or maybe 50 sheets, depending on like the skill of the printer. We'll draw all over them, we'll write all over them. There'll be loads of like test prints. So, and then some of those will be proof, some of those will obviously be destroyed afterwards, just to make sure we're holding up the value of the artworks. We will also run like additional overs when we do the print. So, we can't get 200, say if there's 200, as there is in this edition, we won't just print 200 sheets. Like, we'll have to do more. Like, as much as we can rely on all these technologies, we are human beings and we will make mistakes. And often some of those mistakes can be quite interesting. But once it's done, we'll package it all up, we'll go through everything, and we'll like edition the print. And we will make sure that none of that's left over. So we do a lot more, but we actually only have the ones left at the end. Do a lot of the works go wrong or need to be redone? I guess that's why the overs are there. I really guess that's why the overs are there, because things do go wrong. I'm a human being. I've printed for 10 years. In the first 2 years of me printing, some really big things have gone wrong with old clients, but luckily a lot of the clients we work with are very, very lovely and very understanding that a printing process or an artistic process is iterative, and that's how you learn, right? A guy, Luther Davies, really wonderful guy, he calls himself a master printer, and I think he said something along the lines of, I've just made more mistakes than I care to remember, or something like that. I'm probably misquoting him, but things definitely go wrong, but they go wrong less now, which is fantastic. Are they all the same or a little different? They are like good question. Yes, they are within reason very, very similar. We want all of you to have a part of that experience, like the same part of that experience. There are some editions that we call unique editions. So we're working on a print with Michael Kagan at the moment. I can't go into what it is at this time, but some of them will be unique, so they will be different. An artist might come in hand finished part of it. They will all be different. But in terms of like Roby's one, I think the wonder is in the repetition of it. There is such value in that, that it is just this wonderful meeting of science and art and creativity, and it's at that join that is the most exciting for us part of printmaking. We love the romanticized idea of tradition, but we also love looking to the future and utilizing technologies that are just sitting there to be collaborated with. And so yes, they are all the same in Roby's case, but they will have minor differences that you hold two against each other. They'll be ever so slightly different, but in terms of color, one person's not going to get a red one and one person's not going to get a blue one. So great question. There's some more here. So how big is the team? It's 15 people. We're looking to hire very, very soon with a new place that we're looking at getting. We have a wonderful team, which is just really fantastic. So really relatively small team, but relatively large for fine art printmaking. So like I said, I absolutely love my team. It's the best place I've ever worked, and they are all wonderful. They all eat lunch on this very tiny table here, so I look forward to moving premises and getting them somewhere else to eat and get change. So how do you do the colour matching? Very, very good question. Well, again, it's iterative, so we just kind of get on with it. It comes out as it comes out, but the way that happens is that it's very much under control, because we are trying to simulate what's happening on the PC, on the graphics application like Photoshop or something like that, and we're trying to replicate what's happening. We use a spectrophotometer very recently. Our artwork Jen was using that on this print, and we actually got them really, really close, so that was fantastic. But sometimes, you know, what does match mean? Like, you can spend so long matching a colour, and an artist can come in and go, oh, I like that red, and you go, that's the red. And I think if we try and match too much, it can kind of lose what we're trying to do. It's not an excuse for like to print a red again instead of a blue or something like that. But great question. It's different for every artist. Every single artist wants someone high fidelity, someone low fidelity. I might breeze through some of these questions. I feel like I'm taking a long time. I see you're working in a lab. Do you take steps to protect the environment? Yes, absolutely. Everyone has PPE. You probably saw people who were curing had visors. You know, we actually use a lot of UV, so we don't have a lot of solvents anymore, which is a really great step and sustainability step for the company, and also just great for us because it gives you less, like I said, grey hairs. It's not, things aren't drying out. So we really, really care about that, and we're actually spending a lot of time putting a health and safety schedule together and putting a lot of investment into that. Tom, do you work with any artists, or do they generally have to be well known, public eye? You know, I've worked for everyone and everyone. Now we work with more high profile artists, which is like a real honor, but I have in the past just worked for, I started printing for my mates, you know, and one thing led to another. So, you know, we might not necessarily have the resources or the time to like print for everybody, but if someone had a question about their artwork, like, I would very happily like give some advice on it. What are your experiences? Water-based inks. That got me started. You know, they're great, but you cannot. Oil-based and solvent-based inks and UV-based inks, there's nothing like them. Water-based is good, it's okay, and you can do great work with it. But if you want to go to like that level of like surface quality, really building things up, glosses that you just can't get with evaporation drying inks, it's oil and it's UV every time, and I do feel now, maybe as an expert, I can't maybe say that I really do believe that's the case. So yeah, but if you buy a water-based print, they will be also wonderful feats of engineering, you know, in print engineering. So don't think that they're any less valuable. I just really, really love the smell of solvent inks. So how do you? Who decides which canvas you should make as a print? Well, that's with the wonderful artist team and the whole of Avant Art at the moment with this print. So they just have a great eye, they're great curatorial eye. They'll decide that. Yeah, let's go on to the next question. Have you tried to control split fountain before? Yeah, I tell you what. Oh, sorry. And in the details you try and achieve. Yeah, we haven't actually done one as make ready, but I've done quite a few when I was just me, and yeah, it's sick. Like, I'm pretty good at it. Yet to do one with Avant Art, like it's that would be really cool. Let's do one as we can do it, and you do it very large format. I'm sure the printers who are listening are getting grey hairs right now hearing that, but yes, we can do it. Do you manually separate colours and then send it to the RIP? How do you decide how many colours will be? Both. We use RIP software and we use graphics applications in a colour management workflow that I've designed, and that, I guess, is our unique selling point, is that is this articulated workflow. So yeah, we kind of use both. I would spend 4 hours going into that, so that's a great question. I'm really sorry I can't answer it. How do you get the colour right? How many proofs do you need? Artist dependent again. Really artist dependent. Sometimes we just nail it, sometimes it's just a bit different. Are any RIP tools programmed in-house, or do you use something vendor provides? We use Wasatch. I can be really open about that. We use Wasatch, which is an American RIP, and it is user friendly, but it's very, very cool. And we use a very, very special technique that we think is incredibly unique. I'm actually applying for R&D tax credits for, of a color separation algorithm that we've made in Photoshop that kind of synthesizes and does part of it